there's a version of you that scares you. Not because it's evil, but because it's real, raw, honest, and whole. Carl Jung believed that we can't become who we truly are until we face what we fear in ourselves. This video is about the path to that version of you, the one you've been running from. 1. The fear of authenticity. Most people live behind a carefully crafted mask. Not necessarily out of malice, but out of fear of being rejected, misunderstood, or seen as weak. They learn, often from an early age, to hide their insecurities, desires, and flaws. Instead, they show the world only the parts of themselves that are socially acceptable. This curated identity becomes their public face, while everything else gets buried. The problem is, what's buried doesn't die, it festers. We convince ourselves that it's better to be accepted than to be real. But in doing so, we start rejecting parts of our true nature. We fear being labeled too emotional, too aggressive, or not enough. So we amputate parts of our identity to fit into a mold that was never meant for us in the first place. This internal split creates tension. We become strangers to ourselves. And eventually, the mask begins to crack under the pressure of the denied self pushing to emerge. Carl Jung warned that the parts of ourselves we avoid confronting don't just disappear, they become the shadow. And the more we deny the shadow, the more it controls us from the background. The fear of authenticity isn't just emotional, it's existential. We don't fear failure as much as we fear the truth, that we're more complex, more contradictory, and more powerful than we let ourselves believe. And that truth, once embraced, can be liberating. 2. The birth of the shadow. In Jungian psychology, the shadow is everything within us that we've rejected or repressed. It includes instincts, impulses, memories, and traits we were taught to hide. Sometimes it's anger, jealousy, or selfishness. Other times it's creativity, confidence, or assertiveness, qualities we've misunderstood as threats to our image. These traits are banished into the unconscious, where they continue to influence us in subtle and destructive ways. The shadow is born the moment we split ourselves into acceptable and unacceptable. Every time we say, "I could never do that," we're likely pointing directly at our shadow. What we refuse to see in ourselves, we start to see in others. We begin projecting, blaming people around us for the very things we're unwilling to admit reside within us. The shadow becomes a hidden driver of behavior, sabotaging our relationships, choices, and self-worth. But here's the paradox: the shadow isn't inherently evil. It's simply unacknowledged. Within it lie buried talents, repressed passions, and parts of our humanity that were silenced. The more we repress, the more we lose access to our own potential. Integrating the shadow isn't about becoming perfect, it's about becoming whole. Because only when we reclaim what we've exiled can we finally move forward without the weight of what we've left behind. 3. The danger of repression. When we repress something, we don't destroy it, we merely push it out of sight. But what lives in the dark doesn't stay silent. It leaks out in unexpected moments. A burst of anger during a casual conversation, an irrational hatred toward someone who mirrors our own flaws, or sudden anxiety that seems to come from nowhere. This is the shadow demanding attention. The more we ignore it, the more it sabotages our lives from the inside out. Repression creates fragmentation. We may think we're in control, but our shadow is pulling the strings behind our decisions, emotions, and habits. We make excuses for destructive behaviors instead of recognizing their true origin. We become reactive, irritable, or numb because what we repress we also fear. And fear leads us to make choices that reinforce the very identity we're trying to protect, keeping us trapped in cycles of avoidance. The longer we deny our inner conflicts, the more powerful they become. Repression feeds the shadow like oxygen feeds fire. Instead of growing stronger, we become weaker, afraid of truth, allergic to discomfort, and dependent on fantasy. True growth demands confrontation. It requires that we look honestly at what we're hiding and ask, why am I afraid of this part of myself? Only by facing the discomfort can we dissolve its power. 4. The shadow as hidden potential. The shadow isn't just a container of darkness, it also holds buried light. Many people confuse traits like assertiveness with arrogance, sensitivity with weakness, or ambition with selfishness. So they suppress these qualities to fit in. But in doing so, they lose access to their full range of human expression. Often what we hide from the world is exactly what we need to grow. The shadow holds the key not only to our wounds but also to our gifts. Imagine someone who avoids conflict at all costs, believing it makes them peaceful. But what they're really avoiding is their own voice, their right to say no, to stand firm, to protect their values. Over time, this turns into passivity and resentment. They feel walked over, yet they fear becoming aggressive. In truth, they're not lacking peace, they're lacking integration. The strength they deny becomes the very trait they admire in others. Reclaiming your shadow means discovering abilities you didn't know you had. That courage you see in someone else? It's also in you, just hidden beneath years of self-censorship. The goal isn't to become someone different, but to become whole. By integrating what you've denied, you stop being a prisoner of other people's expectations and finally step into your own power. The parts you fear may be the parts you need the most. 5. The confrontation with reality. One of the greatest fears we face is being measured. When we stay in the realm of fantasy thinking, I could be great if I really tried, we remain untested and comfortable. But the moment we step into reality, we face actual feedback. We succeed, we fail, we get compared. That's when our illusions fall apart. And for many, that confrontation is terrifying. It threatens the version of ourselves we've been protecting for years. Carl Jung believed that growth begins when illusion ends. You may think you're brilliant, moral, strong, but how do you know if you've never tested it against resistance? Reality is a mirror. It shows us not just our potential, but also our limitations. Yet limitations are not failures, they're starting points. When we engage with what is, rather than what we wish it was, we finally gain clarity. And clarity is the soil where real growth happens. It's tempting to avoid the discomfort of being just average at something we thought we'd be exceptional at. But this discomfort is a gift. It humbles us, grounds us, and drives us to improve. Fantasy feels good, but it doesn't evolve you. Reality is painful, but it refines you. Facing who you truly are, including your flaws and gaps, is the first step toward becoming who you're meant to be. Not who you pretend to be, but someone real. 6. The illusion of the ideal self. We all carry an ideal image of ourselves, a curated self we wish to present to the world. It's the version of us that's smart, attractive, successful, always in control. But this ideal self is not real. It's a construct designed to win approval and avoid shame. The danger is when we start confusing this image with our identity. We stop growing because growth would require us to break the illusion. And breaking illusions always hurts. Maintaining the ideal self becomes a full-time job. We avoid people or situations that might expose our weaknesses. We dismiss criticism, deflect blame, and isolate ourselves from anything that challenges our ego. The cost? We never become more than we are. We become trapped in performance, constantly anxious that someone might see through us. Deep down, we know something's missing, but we're too invested in the role to step off the stage. The truth is, your ideal self is holding you back. It's the cage disguised as confidence. To evolve, you have to let go of who you think you should be, and embrace who you really are, flaws and all. That's the beginning of self-acceptance. You're not here to perform perfection. You're here to become whole. And wholeness requires truth, not appearances. When you stop clinging to the image, you make space for transformation. 7. Working with the shadow. Working with your shadow is not a one-time event, it's a lifelong process. It begins with radical honesty, observing your emotional triggers, patterns, and projections without denial. Every time you overreact, feel intense judgment, or repeat a behavior you swore you wouldn't, your shadow is close by. The goal is not to eliminate these reactions but to understand them. To ask, what is this emotion trying to reveal about me? Jung described this journey as a psychological equivalent to the labors of Hercules, grueling, humbling, and transformative. It means owning your contradictions and negotiating with the parts of yourself you've cast aside. It's painful to confront the truth that you're not as kind, as humble, or as brave as you thought. But it's also liberating. Because once you stop pretending, you can start becoming. Real power is born in that humility. Shadow work isn't done in isolation from the world. Your interactions with others become your training ground. Each relationship, argument, and frustration is a mirror reflecting something you need to face. Your dreams, too, are messages from the unconscious, symbols pointing to what you've refused to integrate. The more aware you become, the less power your shadow has over you. And the more whole and free you become. 8. The wholeness of the personality. Jung did not believe in striving for perfection. He saw that goal as not only impossible but damaging to the psyche. Instead, he proposed wholeness as the path to fulfillment. Wholeness means embracing all aspects of yourself, both light and dark, strength and vulnerability. It's the realization that you are not here to be flawless, but to be complete. Integration replaces idealization. Balance replaces control. The conscious and unconscious must work together, not fight each other. When you acknowledge your darkness, it loses its grip on you. When you welcome your emotions instead of suppressing them, they become guides rather than enemies. The ego, once terrified of losing control, learns to coexist with the deeper self. And the self, the true center of the psyche, begins to emerge. That's individuation, becoming who you truly are. Many people live half-lives, editing themselves to fit a fantasy. But true peace comes when you no longer need to hide. You understand that being flawed doesn't mean being broken, it means being human. The journey to wholeness is not clean or easy, but it's real. And real is what heals. Because in a world obsessed with appearances, authenticity is a quiet form of rebellion, and wholeness is its reward. 9. The collective shadow. Just as individuals have a shadow, so do entire societies. Jung called this the collective shadow, the sum of all the traits, behaviors, and truths a culture refuses to acknowledge. It lives in history, in politics, in religion, in silence. We see it in systemic oppression, in wars, in scapegoating, in mass denial. What's repressed collectively doesn't disappear, it festers. And like the personal shadow, it eventually erupts, violently and destructively. The collective shadow is present when nations deny past atrocities, when generations ignore inherited trauma, and when entire groups are dehumanized to protect an idealized identity. It disguises itself in nationalism, religious superiority, and even in good intentions. It tells us we are righteous while others are wrong. But behind that mask is fear, a fear of seeing what we've done, what we've enabled, and what we continue to avoid. Healing the collective shadow begins with individual responsibility. We must confront not only who we are personally but what we're a part of. This means learning uncomfortable history, questioning inherited beliefs, and owning both the harm we've done and the silence we've kept. It requires humility and courage. Because only when enough individuals commit to inner truth can a culture move toward outer reconciliation. The work is personal, but its effects are global. 10. Choice and courage. In the end, the shadow offers you a choice: to live as a fragment, clinging to illusions, or to become whole by embracing what you fear. Most people choose the comfort of fantasy over the pain of truth. They succeed in hypothetical lives but fail in actual ones. And this failure is subtle. It's not dramatic, but quiet. It shows up as regret, numbness, and the haunting feeling that life could have been more, if only they had dared. Choosing to face your shadow takes courage. It means letting go of who you pretend to be and stepping into who you really are. It means risking failure, rejection, and discomfort in exchange for clarity, authenticity, and transformation. Jung wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." Enlightenment is not a glow, it's a confrontation. It's a rebirth through fire. So ask yourself, will you integrate your shadow or remain enslaved by it? Will you live a life of appearance or of depth? The path to becoming who you fear to be is not easy, but it's the only path that leads to freedom. And in that freedom, you won't just find yourself, you'll become someone worth finding. Not perfect, but whole. You don't need to be perfect, you need to be whole. If this message spoke to something deep in you, consider subscribing, liking, or sharing. It helps more than you think. And remember, the shadow you fear may hold the light you've been searching for.